Right now, there's a man in your life who thinks he has all the power. He believes that by ignoring you, by pulling away, by acting like you don't matter, he's somehow in control of the situation. He walks through his days with this quiet confidence, this assumption that no matter what he does or doesn't do, you'll still be there waiting for him. But what if I told you that his silence isn't strength at all? What if I told you that behind that cold indifference lies his greatest vulnerability, a weakness so deep that even he doesn't realize it exists? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, said that what we resist in others is often what we fear most within ourselves. And when a man chooses to ignore you, he's not showing you his power. He's revealing his deepest insecurities, his most profound fears, and his desperate need to maintain an illusion that's already crumbling. Every woman knows this feeling. You send a message and watch as it goes from delivered to read, but no response comes. You see him active on social media, liking other people's posts, engaging with the world around him, but somehow you've become invisible. You start questioning yourself, wondering what you did wrong, analyzing every conversation, every interaction, try to find the moment when everything changed. You tell yourself maybe he's busy, maybe he's going through something, maybe he just needs space. But deep down, you know it's more than that. You know he's making a choice, and that choice feels like a rejection of everything you are. The pain sits in your chest like a weight, growing heavier each time you check your phone and find nothing. You begin to shrink, to question your worth, to wonder if maybe you're asking for too much, expecting too much, being too much. But here's what Jung understood about the human psyche that most people never realize. When someone ignores you, they're not responding to who you are. They're responding to who they are. They're reacting to their own shadows, their own fears, their own sense of inadequacy that they've never learned to face. A man who ignores a woman isn't demonstrating his independence or his emotional strength. He's revealing his terror of vulnerability, his fear of not being enough, his desperate need to feel in control of something, anything, because deep down he feels powerless in ways he can't even admit to himself. Jung called this the shadow, that part of our personality we refuse to acknowledge, the aspects of ourselves we'd rather pretend don't exist. And when a man ignores you, he's projecting his shadow onto you, making you carry the weight of his own emotional cowardice. The truth is, his indifference is a performance, and like all performances, it requires an audience. He needs you to react, to chase, to prove to him that his strategy is working. Every time you double text, every time you try harder to get his attention, every time you question what you did wrong, you're giving him exactly what he needs to maintain his illusion of power. You're confirming his belief that he matters more than you do, that his attention is a prize you should be grateful to receive, that your worth is somehow tied to his acknowledgement of it. But what happens when the audience stops watching? What happens when you refuse to play the role he's assigned you? What happens when you realize that his need to ignore you actually reveals how much he needs you to need him? This is where most women make the fatal mistake. They see his silence as a challenge to overcome, a puzzle to solve, a wall to break down. They pour more energy into the relationship, trying to prove their worth, trying to earn his attention, trying to be the woman he can't ignore. They change themselves, dim their light, make themselves smaller, hoping that maybe if they're less threatening, less demanding, less themselves, he'll finally see them the way they want to be seen. But Jung teaches us that true power doesn't come from making ourselves smaller. It comes from understanding the psychological forces at play, recognizing the patterns, and choosing to respond from a place of wisdom rather than wounds. Carl Jung said that everything we attract into our lives is a reflection of our internal state. If you keep finding yourself in situations where men ignore you, where they pull away just when things start to get real, where they make you feel like you're asking for too much by simply wanting to be treated with basic respect and consideration, then it's time to look deeper. It's time to understand that their behavior isn't really about you at all. It's about their own relationship with intimacy, with vulnerability, with the terrifying possibility that if they let you get too close, you might see all the ways they don't measure up to the image they've created of themselves. The male psyche, just like the female psyche, is constructed around certain core needs and fears. But men are often conditioned to hide these needs, to pretend they don't exist, to build walls around their hearts and call it strength. They're taught that needing someone makes them weak, that showing emotion makes them less masculine, that vulnerability is something to be avoided at all costs. So they develop strategies to maintain distance while still getting their needs met. They ignore you not because you don't matter, but because you matter too much. They pull away not because they don't care, but because they care more than they're comfortable admitting, even to themselves. Think about it this way. If a man truly didn't care about you, if you truly had no impact on his life, would he need to ignore you? Wouldn't indifference be natural, effortless? The fact that he has to work at ignoring you, the fact that he has to make a conscious choice to not respond, to not engage, to not acknowledge your presence in his life, tells you everything you need to know about the power you actually have. His silence isn't absence of feeling. It's evidence of feeling so strong that he doesn't trust himself to handle it in a healthy way. And here's what he's hoping you'll never figure out. His entire strategy depends on your reaction. It depends on you believing that his indifference means you're not valuable, that his silence means you're not worthy of attention, that his distance means you're not lovable exactly as you are. He needs you to chase him because your pursuit validates his worth. He needs you to question yourself because your insecurity makes him feel secure. He needs you to shrink because your smallness makes him feel bigger. But the moment you stop playing this game, the moment you refuse to let his silence define your value, the moment you realize that his behavior says everything about him and nothing about you, the entire dynamic shifts. Carl Jung understood that relationships are mirrors, reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves we most need to heal and integrate. When a man ignores you, he's showing you his wounds, his fears, his inability to handle real intimacy. But he's also giving you an opportunity to discover your own strength, to recognize your own worth, to understand that you don't need anyone's validation to know who you are and what you bring to the world. The question isn't why he's ignoring you. The question is why you're allowing his silence to have so much power over your sense of self. In the next part of this journey, we're going to dive deep into his biggest weakness, the psychological vulnerability that drives this entire pattern. We're going to explore what's really happening in his mind when he chooses silence over connection. And more importantly, we're going to discover how understanding his weakness can become your greatest strength. Because once you see what he's really afraid of, once you understand what he's truly trying to protect, you'll never again mistake his indifference for power. You'll recognize it for what it really is, the desperate attempt of a frightened man trying to maintain control in a situation where he feels completely out of his depth. His biggest weakness isn't what you think it is. It's not pride, it's not stubbornness, and it's definitely not the emotional unavailability he wears like armor. His greatest vulnerability is something far more primitive, far more desperate, and far more revealing than any of those surface-level traits. Carl Jung discovered that at the core of every human being lies a fundamental terror of abandonment. But in men, this terror manifests in the most paradoxical way possible. They abandon others first, before they can be abandoned themselves. They ignore, they withdraw, they disappear, not because they don't care, but because they care so much that the possibility of losing you feels like a threat to their very survival. Think about this for a moment. When a child is afraid of the dark, what do? They close their eyes, believing that if they can't see the danger can't see them. This is exactly what a man does when he ignores you. He's closing his emotional eyes, pretending that if he doesn't acknowledge the depth of his feelings for you, those feelings can't hurt him. He's operating from a place of such profound emotional immaturity that he believes distance equals safety, that silence equals strength, that making you invisible will somehow make his feelings for you disappear. But here's what Jung understood that most people never grasp. What we resist persists, and what we try to ignore grows stronger in the shadows of our unconscious mind. His silence toward you is actually him screaming at himself. Every time he sees your message and chooses not to respond, every time he watches your story but doesn't react, Every time he deliberately avoids the places he knows you'll be, he's engaged in an internal war. Part of him desperately wants to reach out, to connect, to drop the pretense, and just be real with you. But the other part of him, the part that's been wounded before, the part that learned early in life that caring too much leads to pain, fights back with everything it has. So he ignores you not because you don't matter, but because you matter so much that responding feels like stepping into a minefield of vulnerability he doesn't know how to navigate. And here's where it gets really interesting, where his weakness becomes most obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. A man who ignores you is actually giving you unprecedented access to his internal world. He's showing you exactly what terrifies him most. Every behavior pattern, every calculated silence, every deliberate act of indifference is him telling you, without words, what his deepest wounds are. When he goes silent after moments of connection, he's telling you he's afraid of intimacy. When he pulls away, just as things start to get real, he's revealing his terror of being truly known. When he acts like he doesn't care right after showing you that he does, he's demonstrating his absolute panic at the thought of being vulnerable with another human being. Carl Jung said that we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And when a man looks at you, when he considers the possibility of letting you into his real world, into the places where he keeps his fears and hopes and dreams, what he sees isn't your capacity for love and understanding. What he sees is his own fear reflected back at him. He sees every time he's been rejected, every time he's been made to feel like he wasn't enough, every time he dared to hope for something real only to have it fall apart in his hands. So he preemptively rejects you, not because of who you are, but because of who he's afraid he is when he's with you. This is his Achilles heel, the weakness that drives every confusing behavior, every mixed signal, every moment where he seems to care deeply 1 minute and act like you don't exist the next. He's absolutely terrified that if he lets himself feel everything he feels for you, if he allows himself to hope for the kind of connection he's always wanted but never believed he deserved, you'll eventually see through whatever facade he's constructed and realize that he's not the man he pretends to be. He's convinced that his real self, the one behind all the walls and defenses and carefully crafted images, isn't worthy of the kind of love he sees in your eyes when you look at him. But here's what makes this weakness so profound, so exploitable if you understand how to work with it rather than against it. His entire strategy of ignoring you is built on one fundamental assumption, that you'll keep trying to prove your worth to him. He needs you to chase, to pursue, to demonstrate through your actions that he matters more to you than you matter to yourself. Your pursuit validates his belief that he's valuable enough to be fought for, while simultaneously confirming his suspicion that you're not confident enough in your own worth to walk away from someone who doesn't appreciate what you bring to the table. Every time you double text, every time you try to analyze what went wrong, every time you modify your behavior to try to win back his attention, you're actually feeding his weakness rather than challenging it. You're giving him proof that his strategy works, that he can maintain control of the situation by maintaining distance, that he can have his cake and eat it too by keeping you interested while never having to risk his own heart in the process. But what happens when that fundamental assumption gets shattered? What happens when you refuse to play the role of the woman who needs his validation to feel whole? This is where Jung's understanding of the human psyche becomes your greatest weapon. He taught that every psychological pattern, no matter how deeply ingrained, has a breaking point. And for a man whose entire defense system is built around the belief that his indifference gives him power over you, that breaking point comes the moment you demonstrate, through your actions rather than your words, that his attention isn't the prize you've been competing for. The moment you show him that you're perfectly capable of being happy, fulfilled, and complete without his acknowledgement, his entire worldview starts to crumble. Because suddenly, the woman he thought he could control through distance becomes unpredictable. The woman he believed would always be there waiting for him to decide he's ready becomes unavailable. The woman whose self-worth he assumed was tied to his opinion of her starts demonstrating a confidence and independence that has nothing to do with him at all. And in that moment, his weakness is fully exposed. He realizes that his strategy of maintaining power through absence only works if the other person agrees to be powerless in his presence. The beautiful irony is that the very thing he's been trying to avoid by ignoring you, the vulnerability and uncertainty he's been running from, becomes his reality when you stop chasing him. Suddenly, he's the one wondering what you're thinking, what you're feeling, whether you're moving on without him. He's the one checking your social media obsessively, trying to decode your post for signs of how you're doing. He's the one feeling anxious and uncertain and out of control, all the things he was trying to make you feel by withdrawing his attention. And here's what he discovers, often too late. Ignoring someone who refuses to be ignored is exhausting. Maintaining indifference towards someone who no longer needs your attention requires more emotional energy than just being real would have required in the first place. He thought his silence would make you smaller, but instead, your refusal to shrink in response to it makes him realize how small his behavior actually is. Carl Jung believed that every crisis is also an opportunity for growth, for integration, for becoming more whole. When a man's weakness is fully exposed, when his strategy stops working, when he can no longer maintain the illusion that his indifference gives him power, he's faced with a choice. He can either continue to hide behind his fears and lose something valuable in the process, or he can find the courage to be vulnerable, to be real, to risk his heart for the possibility of something genuine. But here's the crucial part. By the time he makes this realization, you may no longer be interested in what he has to offer. In our next section, we're going to explore exactly what happens when you stop feeding his weakness, when you refuse to play by the rules of a game designed to keep you small. We're going to dive into the specific strategies that flip the script entirely, that take you from being the woman who waits for his text to being the woman he's afraid of losing. Because once you understand not just what his weakness is, but how to stop enabling it, everything changes. The power dynamic shifts, the tables turn, and suddenly you're not the one wondering if you're enough. He is. Now that you understand his weakness, let's talk about how to stop feeding it and start leveraging it instead. The moment you decide to change your approach, to stop playing by his rules, and start operating from your own sense of worth, something profound shifts in the entire dynamic. But this isn't about playing games or manipulating him into giving you attention. This is about something far more powerful, becoming the kind of woman who doesn't need his validation to know she's valuable. And in doing so, triggering every insecurity he's been trying to hide behind his wall of indifference. Carl Jung said that the most terrifying thing for any human being is to become conscious of what they've been unconscious of. And for a man who's built his entire strategy around believing his silence gives him power over you, nothing is more terrifying than the moment he realizes you've stopped being affected by it. When you no longer react to his absence with anxiety, when you no longer interpret his silence as rejection, when you no longer modify your behavior to try to win back his attention, he's forced to confront a reality he's been desperately trying to avoid, that his power was always an illusion, dependent entirely on your willingness to believe in it. The first thing that happens when you stop feeding his weakness is confusion. He's been operating under a specific set of assumptions about how this dynamic works, about what your role is supposed to be, about how you're supposed to respond to his calculated indifference. When you suddenly stop following the script he's written for you in his mind, when your energy shifts from scarcity to abundance, from need to choice, from desperation to self-possession, he doesn't know how to interpret it. The woman who used to analyze his every move, who used to send follow-up texts when he didn't respond, who used to make herself available whenever he decided to reach out, has been replaced by someone he doesn't recognize, someone who seems perfectly content with or without his attention. And this is where his weakness becomes most apparent, where all his psychological defenses start to crumble. See, a man who ignores you needs you to care more than he does. He needs the imbalance, the dynamic where you're trying to earn something from him that he's withholding. When that imbalance disappears, when you stop trying to extract validation from someone who's determined not to give it, he loses the foundation of his entire strategy. Suddenly, he's not the prize you're competing for. He's just another person in your life, and not even a particularly important one given how little effort he puts into maintaining a connection with you. Carl Jung taught that what we judge in others is often what we fear becoming ourselves. And when a man sees you stop caring about his opinion, stop seeking his approval, stop making his attention the barometer of your self-worth, he's confronted with his deepest fear, becoming irrelevant. The very thing he's been trying to avoid by maintaining distance, the possibility of not matching, becomes his reality when you demonstrate that you can be happy, fulfilled, and complete without him. He realizes that his strategy of creating scarcity around his attention only works if you believe that attention is scarce and valuable. When you stop believing that, when you start acting like someone who has plenty of options and doesn't need to settle for crumbs, everything changes. But here's what makes this shift so powerful, so transformative for you personally. It's not about him anymore. When you stop trying to decode his mixed signals, stop waiting for his texts, stop organizing your emotional state around his level of interest in you, you create space for something beautiful to happen. You remember who you were before you started diminishing yourself to fit into his narrow definition of what you should be. You rediscover parts of yourself that got buried under the weight of trying to be the woman he might finally decide is worthy of consistent attention and effort. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes crucial. Individuation is the process of becoming who you're meant to be, of integrating all the parts of yourself that you've been hiding or suppressing to fit into someone else's expectations. When you stop contorting yourself to earn his approval, when you stop making yourself smaller to make him feel bigger, you begin the process of becoming whole again. And there's something about a woman who's in the process of becoming herself, who's connected to her own power and purpose, that is absolutely magnetic to everyone around her, including the man who thought he could control her through indifference. The beautiful irony is that the moment you stop trying to get his attention is often the moment you finally have it completely. But by then, something fundamental has changed in you. You're no longer the woman who needed his validation to feel worthy. You're no longer operating from a place of lack, of desperation, of believing that love is something you have to earn through perfect behavior and endless patience. You've become someone who understands that real love, healthy love, doesn't require you to chase it, beg for it, or prove you deserve it. It flows naturally between two people who choose each other freely, without games, without tests, without the need to create artificial scarcity to maintain interest. And this is where his weakness becomes undeniable, where he can no longer hide behind the illusion that his indifference makes him powerful. When you stop reacting to his silence with anything other than acceptance, when you stop trying to win a game you never agreed to play, when you start living your life as if his opinion of you is just one opinion among many and not necessarily the most important one, he's faced with a choice. He can either step up and start showing up as someone worthy of your time and energy, or he can continue his pattern of emotional unavailability and watch you move on to someone who doesn't need psychological warfare to feel secure in a connection. Carl Jung said that we cannot change anything until we accept it, and condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. When you truly accept that some people are not capable of the kind of connection you're seeking, when you stop trying to change someone who hasn't asked to be changed, when you release the fantasy of who he could be if only he would let down his guard, you free yourself from the prison of hope deferred. You stop being the woman who waits for potential to become reality and start being the woman who recognizes reality for what it is and makes decisions accordingly. The most powerful thing you can do when a man ignores you isn't to ignore him back, isn't to play games or try to make him jealous or analyze his psychology until you drive yourself crazy trying to figure out how to crack the code. The most powerful thing you can do is to genuinely stop caring about the outcome with him specifically and start caring about the outcome for yourself generally. When your focus shifts from how do I get him to see my worth to how do I honor my own worth regardless of who sees it, everything changes. You stop being someone who needs external validation to feel valuable and start being someone whose value is so evident, so undeniable, that people either recognize it immediately or reveal themselves as someone whose opinion doesn't matter anyway. This shift terrifies him because it represents everything he's been trying to avoid through his strategy of emotional distance. It forces him to confront the possibility that while he was playing games, while he was trying to maintain control through withholding, while he was testing your patience and devotion, you were growing, evolving, becoming more yourself, and potentially moving beyond the need for anything he has to offer. The woman he thought he could keep on standby, available for whenever he decided he was ready to invest real effort, has transformed into someone who's no longer interested in being anyone's backup plan or convenient option. In our final section, we're going to explore what happens next, how to maintain this powerful shift even when he tries to pull you back into the old dynamic, and most importantly, how to use this experience as a catalyst for attracting the kind of love that doesn't require you to shrink, chase, or prove your worth. Because once you understand how to stop feeding his weakness and start honoring your own strength, you'll never again be willing to accept less than you deserve from anyone. What happens next will either be the most liberating experience of your life or the most challenging, depending on how attached you've become to the familiar pain of wanting someone who doesn't want you back. When you fully embody this shift, when you truly stop feeding his weakness and start honoring your own strength, he will likely try to pull you back into the old dynamic. This is where most women falter, where they mistake his sudden interest for genuine change, where they allow themselves to believe that his panic at losing control means he's finally ready for real connection. But Carl Jung warned us that people will do almost anything to avoid facing their own shadows, including temporarily changing their behavior to restore a dynamic that makes them feel safe and superior. He might start responding to your messages again, but notice the quality of his responses. Are they deep, meaningful conversations, or are they just enough engagement to test whether you're still available for his convenience? He might start making plans with you, but pay attention to the effort involved. Is he prioritizing you in his schedule, or is he fitting you in around everything else that matters to him? He might even tell you he's missed you, that he's been thinking about you, that he realizes he made a mistake by pulling away. But Jung taught us to watch what people do, not what they say, because the unconscious always reveals itself through actions rather than words. The test of whether his renewed interest is genuine or just another manipulation tactic lies in consistency and effort over time. A man who has truly recognized your value, who has genuinely confronted his own fears and chosen to show up differently, will demonstrate that change through sustained behavior, not grand gestures or temporary attention. He'll communicate regularly without you having to wonder when you'll hear from him next. He'll make concrete plans and follow through on them. He'll introduce you to his world instead of keeping you compartmentalized from it. He'll invest emotional energy in getting to know you as a person rather than just trying to maintain your interest in him. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is perhaps the most important part of everything we've discussed. Whether he changes or not is irrelevant to your transformation. Whether he recognizes your worth or continues to take it for granted doesn't determine your value. Whether he decides to step up or steps away entirely doesn't define what's possible for you in love and relationships. The real victory isn't getting him to see you differently. The real victory is seeing yourself differently, so clearly and so completely that you never again doubt your worthiness of love, attention, effort, and genuine care. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. And who you are is not someone who needs to convince anyone of your value. Who you are is not someone who should have to chase, beg, or prove yourself worthy of basic respect and consideration. Who you are is someone deserving of a love that chooses you every day, not because you've earned it through perfect behavior or endless patience, but because you exist, because you bring something unique and beautiful to this world, because your heart and mind and spirit are gifts that the right person will recognize immediately and cherish consistently. This experience with a man who ignores you is actually preparing you for something better. It's teaching you to recognize the difference between someone who sees your worth and someone who needs you to diminish yourself to feel comfortable. It's showing you how to maintain your sense of self even when someone else is trying to make you question it. It's developing your ability to walk away from situations that don't serve you, even when part of you wants to stay and try to make them work. These are not just relationship skills. These are life skills that will serve you in every area of your existence. The woman you become through this process, the one who refuses to shrink for anyone, who knows her value isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it, who could be alone without being lonely because she genuinely enjoys her own company. That woman is magnetic in ways that desperation never is. She attracts people who are ready for real connection because she's no longer available for anything less. She creates relationships based on mutual choice rather than mutual need, on genuine appreciation rather than convenient availability, on shared vision rather than shared insecurity. And here's what Jung understood about the human psyche that most people never realize. We teach others how to treat us through what we accept and what we refuse to tolerate. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you're training the people around you to believe that less is all you're worth. Every time you chase someone who's pulling away, you're confirming their belief that your attention isn't valuable enough to be earned through their effort. Every time you make excuses for someone's inconsistent behavior, you're enabling them to continue treating you inconsistently. But when you start honoring your own worth, when you begin expecting others to match your energy and effort, when you stop settling for crumbs and start requiring the full meal, something beautiful happens. The people who are comfortable treating you poorly either step up to meet your new standards or step out of your life entirely. Either way, you win. Either you get better treatment or you get better people. Either the relationship improves or it ends, making space for something healthier to enter your life. This is the ultimate revelation about dealing with a man who ignores you. It was never about him. It was always about you learning to value yourself enough to stop accepting treatment that doesn't match your worth. It was about you discovering that your happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's validation, that your completeness doesn't require another person's approval, that your love for yourself is the foundation from which all other healthy relationships must grow. Carl Jung believed that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But that transformation should elevate both people, not diminish either one. If someone's presence in your life requires you to become less than who you are, if their love comes with conditions that ask you to hide parts of yourself, if their attention is so inconsistent that you're constantly wondering where you stand, then the transformation happening isn't healthy growth. It's the slow erosion of your self-worth, and no connection is valuable enough to justify that cost. The man who ignores you today is doing you a favor, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. He's showing you who he is, how he handles connection, what his capacity is for genuine intimacy and consistent care. He's revealing his limitations, his fears, his unwillingness or inability to show up as a partner worthy of what you have to offer. This information is invaluable because it allows you to make an informed decision about whether this is the kind of love you want to invest your precious time and energy in. The answer, when you truly understand your worth, will always be no. Not because he's a bad person, not because you need to punish him for his behavior, but because you've learned to recognize the difference between someone who enhances your life and someone who complicates it. You've developed the wisdom to know that love shouldn't be a battlefield where you're constantly fighting to prove you deserve to be there. Real love, healthy love, mature love doesn't ignore you to test your devotion. It sees you, appreciates you, and chooses you consistently. Not perfectly, but consistently. So here's my challenge to you, and it's also my promise. Stop trying to solve the mystery of why he ignores you, and start celebrating the clarity his behavior provides. Stop trying to change his mind about your value, and start protecting that value from people who can't see it. Stop waiting for him to recognize what he has, and start recognizing what you deserve. Because the moment you truly understand your worth, the moment you embody it completely, you'll attract the kind of love that doesn't require you to question it, doubt it, or fight for it. You'll draw in someone who sees your light and wants to add to it, not dim it. Someone who communicates clearly, shows up consistently, and treats your heart like the precious gift it is. That's the life waiting for you on the other side of this lesson. That's the love you'll create when you stop accepting less than you deserve. And that's the woman you'll become when you finally understand that his weakness was never your problem to solve, but your strength was always your power to claim. If this video opened your eyes to something you've been struggling to see, if it helped you understand that you're not asking for too much by wanting consistency and effort, then I have one request. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this is just the beginning of your transformation journey. There's so much more we need to explore about understanding the psychology behind relationship dynamics and building the kind of love that actually lasts. Like this video if it resonated with you, and please share your story in the comments. Let's build a community of women who refuse to settle for less than they deserve. Your experience might be exactly what another woman needs to hear to find her own strength. Remember, the power was always in your hands. You just needed to stop giving it away.